My name is Bret Grinslade. I'm a product manager on Oracle Analytics Cloud. Today I'm going to talk about managing and preparing your data in the cloud. Remember, there's a Q&A section below, so let's get started. Okay, today we're going to talk about managing and preparing your data in the cloud. We're going to go over a few basics. We'll also do some things to help you get your data sets just right. We'll talk about blending data from multiple sources. I'm also going to talk about when you should be using data flows and how to schedule a data refresh. We'll also close with a little bit of the roadmap. Key components for the analytics in the cloud include all the aspects of the Oracle infrastructure. There's everything from your data sources, and of course it can be third-party data sources, as well as things like the autonomous data warehouse and even building data lakes. In our case, we want to be able to do analytics, and so we're going to be focusing on the far right-hand side of this diagram, and all the users can use this system. In particular, OAC is focused on the citizen data scientists and the business user. So we'll go ahead and cover the different layers of the Oracle Analytics Cloud stack. We have data sources kind of in the bottom of this picture. We have the different repositories for your metadata. We're going to focus on this middle part with the red band there. This is the data preparation. And of course, you'll be able to do analysis and visualization of those once you get them into the tool. Part of OAC's mission is to make data preparation very easy. So we have a lot of built-in transformations. We have common steps. I'll show you some little more advanced features such as binning and grouping. And I'll show you some even more advanced features like using regex. One important aspect of the Oracle Analytics Cloud is that we have deep profiling. We have patented technology that will analyze the content of your columns and not just the names or things like the data types. And it'll identify specific types and give you recommendations based on those semantic types. This will allow you to do enrichments and help us recommend different kind of transformations. We'll see that in the data preparation steps. So let's go ahead and jump into a demo. Okay, what I'm going to go ahead and do is import a data set. In this case, I'm going to create a project and import it from a file. You can also do this from a database. The features work the same. So let's just grab a quick customers data set here. And I'll show you a few things that we can do in this data set. I have two different that I'm going to end up joining together, and you'll see that in a minute. So this is just the quick preview of the data, making sure it's the data that you want. So let's go ahead and pull that in. Now that we pulled that in, it's doing that profiling I was talking about earlier. And so now you're going to start seeing the recommendations. We have over 70 recommendations that are identified in this data set. You can do things like tweak different columns, and this is going to be your surface to decide exactly what you want to change in the data set. And if you look at the recommendations on the right, there's a lot of things that you'll see like national identifiers, and we'll get to those in a minute. Let's just take a quick example. Notice in the street address here, I'm going to click on this one column, and it'll show you the specific recommendations for this column. In this case, it's saying that it's identified different parts. So let's go ahead and use one of these suggestions to maybe pull out the street number. So I'm pulling out the street number here, and what I'm going to do is just give it a useful name. And you realize this is just a one-click recommendation. We didn't have to type in any kind of formula or anything like that. It's using the transform in the fly, and it's easy to do these kind of things. And so now we've pulled out the street number. We could do other things. Obviously, we could break up more aspects of that. Let's kind of keep looking in the data set. So one thing you'll notice here is we have cities. When you click on it, you'll see that it is a city. It's not because of the name of the column, it's actually because of the content of the data. So our profilers identified that. Now that we've identified that it's a city, we have a set of enrichments you can see on the right. And in this case, let's pick some enrichment like maybe we should do something like just add in the population. This is a system knowledge that we have inside of Oracle Analytics Cloud. This is not something that was in your data set. This is something that came from the system. And we could pull other recommendations as well. But let's look at a couple of other transforms here. So you'll notice in zip code, it's been identified as a zip code. You can also do enrichments here. Let's do something like maybe we'll pull in the city. So let's go ahead and use an enrichment here to pull in the city. Okay, now that I've pulled the city in from the system knowledge, the first thing you'll notice is that some of the cities are missing. So even though the column was identified as a zip code, you'll see that some of the zip codes don't look quite right. And that's actually a common problem with zip codes. In this case, they're missing the first zero. Now you could do something like try to replace all of the numbers, like identify each one and replace each one with a script. In this case, let's do something a little more powerful. Let's use a regex expression. So what we're going to do is create a group, that's with the parentheses, and so it'll start at the beginning of the column and it'll be 4 digits, and that'll be the end of the column. And you can look up online different ways to do regex, but basically in this case we're going to add a 0 at the front, and then we're going to append the thing that was identified after the 0. So this will be a regular expression that will be applied at runtime to enrich this data. You'll see now that the codes have all been replaced with that simple transform. So it's a very powerful feature that let you do creative things with regex. One thing you'll notice now is that the cities aren't correct still, but these steps are executed in order. So let me go ahead and add that identification of city again after I change the zip code. When this is finished, you'll see that the cities are all filled in. This just kind of show you a little bit how that apply script works. It's a set of steps that happen in order, and you can do more advanced features such as the regex. Let's look at some more recommendations that come from the tool. Before we do that, let's look at this one column that says date of birth. That's probably not something we want in the system. So let's go ahead and use that though to generate some useful data. I'm going to go ahead and create a new column. We'll be able to generate some data from that by doing a formula. So this is the age. Let's call it the age. We're just going to cast the date of birth to a number. And so let's remove the current date. So we're just going to create the difference and divide that by 365 and cast that as an int. Now this will become a number. So you'll see in the preview, it shows that number coming out. Let's just add that step. And now I have calculated age. And in that case, now I have, basically I don't want to give that date of birth downstream. So let's just go ahead and delete that from the data set so nobody can see it downstream. Now that we have the age, let's try to do something a little more useful. Let's go ahead and bin this. What we're going to do is we're going to take this numeric value and create a range and assign values to the bins. So let's call this generations, because age is useful, but it can be more useful to kind of categorize people by age. So let's say we have Gen Z, and that goes to maybe 27. I'm not the expert on these dates, so let's do Gen Y, that goes maybe to 37. Let's do Gen X, and that goes to 52 or so. Let's say boomers are up to 77, and let's say the silent generation is over 77. Now I've added these categorical values to the age, and this is again derived from that date of birth field that we're not showing to the users now. It's actually removed from the data set and they won't be able to get access to it. And so that's an example of using binning to make your data a little bit easier to analyze and have more interesting information in it. Next, you'll notice that we have identified this payment type. We identify credit card numbers even if the column name doesn't have anything about credit card in it. So in this case, there's no analytical value for us having the credit card number. So let's just go ahead and probably delete it. We could obfuscate it, but in this case, it's just extra data. We don't need to go downstream and create any risk. So let's just remove that. And if you look at, there's other types of things that have been identified. The last one I'll click on here is the national identifier. And this was all part of those 70 recommendations we saw at the beginning. In this case, we were able to identify that it's a social security number, again, not because of the name. We could delete it, but well, let's say we have a business process that uses the last 4 digits. So maybe we could do something like obfuscate the first digits. And so that one-click transformation applied that. Now in this case, it's hidden, but it's a little bit, doesn't look great. So I don't really want to see that in any kind of reporting kind of scenario. So let's go ahead and do one more thing. Let's go ahead and extract it. And now we've extracted the last 4 digits, and we can just rename this field really quickly. Now that we rename this, let's call it something like a lot of business processes. It's called like last 4 of your SSN. Now we've have a more useful piece of data that maybe we use in some kind of reporting or a screen that would show the last 4 digits. And then we still have this data in here. We could leave it in and we could remove it just like we were doing before. You could also do other things such as you can change case. There's lots of different commands you can do with one click. But I think that's enough to give you guys an idea of the kind of transformations that we're doing at this point in time. So let's apply this. And then we're going to go ahead and add in another data set. So you see at the bottom, I have this little plus button. I'm going to click that. And what this is going to do is this is going to bring another Excel spreadsheet that I'm going to use. It could be a database or another connection into the project that we have here. And this will let us do transformations on a second set of data. Okay, and so the same kind of process, we're importing it in. And you can see this looks like the data that I'm looking for. And now what I'm going to do is it'll go through the same process. It'll profile. Let me show you another little feature that's really useful to use, which is we can do grouping. Grouping is like binning, but it's done for attribute values and not for numeric ranges. Maybe we have a business process that uses, say, 3 different groups of priority for orders. this data set has 5 different things, and so let's kind of clean that up a little bit. And this is just an example. Obviously, your business will have separate, your own processes. Let's put critical and high into one group. Let's create a group called medium, and we'll just put medium in that. And let's create one more group. Let's call this low, and we'll say if it wasn't specified, we'll just have it be all low. And so now I have these categories. These might be useful for analysis later down the line, and I've kind of grouped that data together. And you can hide the original column if you want to do that. One other thing we might want to do is these are order dates on the end. So we recognize over 30 different date formats, and in this case, it's identified this to be a date, but we have some common operations. So one we want to do here, let's say we would extract the day of the week. Maybe we're interested in when people are doing orders, more orders on Monday, more orders on Friday. And so we're going to pull the day of the week out. You can also do this in a visualization, but a lot of times it's handy to do it right in the data set. Okay, let's go ahead and apply that script. We've done enough little tweaking to this, and then I'll show you in the data diagram. These two data sets have been joined automatically. We detected a join based on the information in the data sets, and so it's going to use those to do visualization. So let's go ahead and use these. So you notice I didn't do anything. I didn't have to define a join. I was just, it just calculated that for me automatically. So again, this is data coming from different data sources. So let's just grab something like the generations we created. And then let's look for something else like sales. And let's just drag those over to the visualization. It'll auto create a visualization. And you can see that this is that information. And maybe we want to know more about, say, what the boomers are doing. So let's do something like add a product category. And now you can see the different categories of orders. The nice part about this is all done, with this data preparation very seamlessly. And we put these data sets together without having to do any other real work. All right, let's go ahead and flip back to the slides. Okay, let's just kind of go over some of the things we saw in that demo. So use of recommendations, that's one of the easiest ways to do transformations of data sets. Using features like binning and grouping, this is a useful way to get a lot more value out of your reports. I want to show that because it's a very common way to make things easier to use and report on and create better visualizations. You can create calculations. We kind of did the little basic one for date of birth just because everyone understands that, but you can do rather complex calculations directly in the preparation step like that if you have something that you want to do at the row level. You can use advanced features such as the regex that we showed. You can do quite complicated replacements and things like that with regex. So I do recommend you look into that. And then it's really amazing that we can do all of this on live data sets. We have some improvements that make it work even better and faster in the next few months coming up. And if you see Gabby Rubin's session, he'll talk more a little bit about some of those improvements we have coming. And then finally, after you've done all these steps, you can share those data sets with other workers. We use them in one project, but you can share them with the rest of your team, and they can also take advantage of the transformations you've done on that data set. Okay, so let's kind of move on to the next phase here. Sometimes doing just data preparation on a simple data set's not enough. You want to do something a little more complicated, or maybe you're using data from different sources. So we have an integrated data preparation experience in the product that we call data flows. These are a little more advanced. They have a few more features, and in particular, they let you do things like schedule runs and things like that. So we'll go through some of the tips and tricks for this as well. Let's go ahead and jump into the demo. First thing I want to show you is that I have data sets from a couple of different databases. I already set up these data sets and did some prep work on them, but that's coming from database 2. This one's coming from database 1. So what I'm imagining here is that maybe I'm getting sales data from, say, Europe and from the United States from different sources. So I'm going to go ahead and create a real simple data flow that lets me merge these two together. So first thing I'm going to do is add one of the data sets. So let's say this is the US data, and you'll see some information right there in the preview. It looks similar to the other thing. And in order to join it with other data, I want to do a union, but first I have to add the other data set in. So let's grab a second data set. This is the one from the EU sales data. Now I have two, one from the US and one from EU. Same kind of process. And then I'm just going to do a quick join, but this is going to be a union. So I'm going to union the rows. There's different kinds of unions we can do. And it's basically a way to append data together. We're going to use the simple one, which is really just a direct append to the end of the data set. So now we're going to be joining these two together, and we're going to save this data set out. And we're going to call this our demo sales. And one thing we can do is we can put this in a database connection. So what this does is a lot of times you'll just want to use a database for doing your live queries. Maybe the data is a little larger, or you have a database that you can have access to. You can save it in data set storage, but in this case, let's just go ahead and save it to a database, because it's kind of an advanced feature that maybe some people don't quite realize you can do. So now what this has done is union those two data sets into one Now I have one sales data. So let's create another data flow here. And in this data flow, I'm going to do something kind of similar to what we did before. Let's pull in a spreadsheet. Of course, this could be from a database as well. So let me grab a customer's data set. And this one we're going to make some improvements on. So first, let's just go ahead and import this. Now we have that data set. So if I look down here, it's actually kind of busy, quite a few columns. So I'm going to do a little trick here, which is I'm just going to add a select columns while I'm working on it, and I'll remove that at the end. But this will help me kind of see just the things that I need to tweak. I don't want to, some of these things I'm not going to change. Some of these things I'm going to play with. In your data, obviously, you'll decide what's the right thing to do. So the first thing I'm going to notice is maybe gender is a common field, and I want to do something on it. Like we could lowercase it. This is just showing you all the different kind of power we have of these, in the data flows. Now that we've normalized that data to all be lowercase, let's go ahead and write a little formula that will allow us to sort of calculate something from the gender. This is just a silly example, so let's just use a case statement. This can be like a switch and let you kind of do multiple selects. So we'll do case gender. So when gender is M, we'll set it to male. And this might be in your internal process. You probably do something more interesting than this because these are relatively straightforward, but let's go ahead and do it. F is female. You could do any kind of transform you want and complex case statements here. And so we're going to go ahead and do an else for a default, and then we'll validate that. And so now what you'll see in the preview is once I hit my apply here, you're going to be able to see in the preview now we have the gender 2 that was calculated. See the second column that says income level. This one's a little bit weird, so let's do a split on it. Try to get rid of those funky characters. So let's do a custom split. Make a colon as the delimiter, and we don't want to use the first field. We don't really know what that means, so let's just put the second field in, and let's give it a meaningful name. Let's call it something like income. From here we could do something like a trim if we wanted to remove the spaces around it. In this case, all we really want to do here is we just want to use it as a number. So let's just use a shortcut here to convert it to a number. It pre-types that for me, and then here I can go ahead and put an extra formula in. So now I'm just using this as a formula right in line in the data flow transform. And so now we have a real number for that income. And let's do one more thing. We have this name here with a comma in the middle. Let's go ahead and make this into 2 names. We'll split it by a comma. We want both of them. In this case, we want both elements. See, before we did the split and we only grabbed the second one. In this case, we want both of them. And now we have first name and a last name. I think I kind of got those in the wrong order. That's okay, we'll just go with it for time here. So let's go ahead and add one more column. Let me show you how you could do a formula here to merge the full name together. But let me again show you how to use another shortcut, which is you can just go to this and you can say, I want to do a merge. And a merge is like a simple way to help you append some things together. So let's call this the full name. Again, you could do this with a formula using a concat function, but this is just really easier to do. So let's just grab the names, pretend like I got them in the right order, and separate them with a space. And so now we've made some tweaks and improvements. The last thing I'm going to do here is add one more column. We have this state, but I happen to know that when I get the data from the UK, the country is not set correctly. So let's do another case statement here. Case when state, and so this is auto-completing for me, state is equal to UK. So it really isn't the state, it's the country, but it's just a kind of way the data is set up. So I'm going to use my data flow to clean this up. It's going to be set the country to UK, else all the rest of the data comes from the US. So we're going to set it to US, and that'll give us this country field. So now we've added a new column to the data set. We could also use a grouping and bins and things like that. I just wanted to show you another way to do it. We have the select columns. I could remove that step and then all the columns would be back, but I'm just going to click on it again and show you what was in it, what we had done when we did select columns that removed a bunch of stuff from the model. I'm just going to add them all right back in. Normally I would probably delete the select columns, but I'll leave it in there so you can see the kind of work that I'm doing. So let's call this customers data. Let's go ahead and save this in data set storage, and we'll run the data flow. And so what this is doing is taking that customers data and now moving it, from that spreadsheet, doing a transform, and now I have it for use in OAC. And let's do one more thing. Let's create a data flow that will take that demo data that we created before. And now we want to join that, a real join in this case, with the customer data we just created. I could have put all these in one big long data flow, but it's harder to explain and it's a little harder to do for maintenance. So I'm going to go ahead and do this as 3 different data flows. And so this one we're doing a join. You'll see it suggests the customer ID. And then kind of just so you can see how this is working, if I click on, you can see those are all the columns are in one big long row. If I look at data set, that's coming in with just these values. If I look at customers, it has all the stuff, including all those transforms that we did. And so now we have a join. And so now this is all pulled together as one big row. Let's go ahead and save that back out again. And I'm just going through these so you get the idea and you're comfortable building these data flows. So let's call this demo sales all. And let's kind of use that database connection again. So we'll push this data to a database again. I could save it to data set storage. In the real world, I would probably use add to existing data. That's like if I keep running this data flow over and over again, I append data. Then I'd have to pick a column for identifying the timestamps and things like that. For simplicity here, let's just do replace all data. It depends on your business scenario, which one you're going to do. Okay, now that I have these 3 data flows, hope you're staying with me here. Let's create one more asset here. Let's create a sequence. This is a way to run a set of data flows together. So first, maybe I grab that customer's data. If that was coming from a database, it would be, make a little more sense. It's being updated. Then I'll do the sales, and then I will do all the sales all after I pull the sales in. So understand this is being done in order. The customer data first, then the sales, and then all sales. So now I can run this sequence anytime I want to refresh all of that data, and I can schedule it. I'll show you how to schedule it. Let me go back to let's wait for this to be done. Okay, let's go back to the first page. I'll show you a quick search here. I love the search bar on the home page. So now I'm going to take this sequence and I'm going to say, hey, let's set a schedule. Then you can schedule it for, never to repeat. You can schedule it for, daily or weekly. So, if you set it to something like daily, you can pick the time and how often you want it to repeat, or you can set it to something like weekly. If you do weekly, you can say which days of the week you want it to run. So it's a super handy feature. Now, if I ran that, I would get the data. Let's just really quick take a peek at the data. Kind of, you always have to show in an analytics demo some information. So let's just grab something like the value, which was the total sales, and let's grab one of these fields that we added in during the data flow enrichment, like gender, and then we can add something like maybe the country. Not that interesting, so let's pick a better visual. You can use any of the visuals, work with these data flow data sets. So you can do something like a narrate. You can do something like a map. Obviously, since we have some geographic data, a map sounds like a good idea. I won't go into data visualization. There's other sessions on that, but I just want to give you an idea of kind of how this works. And that you can do this. These data transformations, they're pretty easy to do. We did a lot of advanced stuff without having to learn too much. So really that's the end of the demo here. I just want to reinforce that if you ran that sequence, you would then get all of that data refreshed with all those different steps. And again, I could have done it as one big long data flow. I think in this case, it's a little easier to understand and to maintain if you had it as separate data flows and run it through a sequence. Okay, let's just really quickly cover what we saw there. We combine data from multiple data sources. We use many of the same kind of transformations and calculations you can use in data set preparation. We also took advantage of advanced features such as targeting a database table for the output. We saw that there's a way to do incremental updates. We've scheduled those things so they could run on a regular basis. And I didn't show this, but I just want to highlight, you'd use the same kind of process to do more advanced features, such as scoring with the machine learning model. Philippe has some great sessions on that, so I recommend looking at those. So really quickly, let me just kind of go through the roadmap. We have a lot of improvements coming for data quality insights. We have these really interesting way to do that system recommendations that we had seen there that'll be coming through what we call our custom knowledge experience, which will let you enrich the data with your own data. We have improvements to live data preparation. It's even faster, and we are showing here. We have more inline transformations coming. We have support for analytic functions from ADW and Oracle databases, such as pivot and unpivot. We're going to be able to share data flows between users. I do recommend seeing Gabby Rubin's session that was done on June 9th. He has a lot of previews of the cool things we have coming, and that's where you can see the demos. Everything I covered in this session, you can actually do in today's product. So I just want to kind of close. We showed you data preparation and interaction pieces of the product, and there's still a lot to learn, and I hope that you guys have a better understanding of some of the key things to do there and look at the other sessions to learn more about things like ML or other new features coming in the product. Finally, we have a whole lot of resources available. We have a library you can just use by hand, go to OAC Live. We have a learning library that has all kinds of great examples and tutorials. You can see a lot of these features explained in the YouTube channel. When we do new releases, we always update the YouTube channel with information about each of the releases. And finally, we have an ideas lab. It's a great place to work with the rest of the community to tell us what ideas you have and vote on your ideas and things that other peers in OAC have. Thank you so much for attending this virtual summit. I hope you've learned something in this session. Remember, there's resources available below the video, and when the video shuts off here, we're going to switch over to live Q&A. Thank you again.
Hey, okay, that was a great presentation, Bret. So first, before we jump in, we've got quite a few questions. But before we jump in, after this is over and people are watching this on demand and they have questions, where can they go? I know there's a couple places that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd say they can go to the Customer Connect site, and we have an active forum out there. And for new ideas, they can definitely go to the Idea Lab, and that's the best place to interact with the product management team.
Okay, so one of our questions is, why would I target a table in a database?
Yeah, so you can definitely save data with a data. Yeah, you can save data with a data flow to a data set, but a lot of times we'll find customers that will do things like they want to use that same data they're preparing for other processes, like maybe machine learning algorithm, or you can also just use the power of your database. If you have an ADW, you can put those data sets in there and then join those with other things to make more efficient queries. So it's just, we have a lot of customers that end up doing both.
Great. So we have another customer question here. How do I extract data from a JPEG or PNG format?
Oh, that's a great question. We don't have any built-in things for that right now. I think what I would look into is maybe pushing those into a database and looking at some other transformations, but we really are mostly working with like text and numeric data. There are a few other advanced features such as text analysis where we leverage the Oracle database for that, but we don't have a way to do like extract a PNG file or do like machine learning on an image.
Great. Now, can we use the data flow table target through an on-premises data gateway?
Oh, that's great. Great question. A lot of people ask me that one. At the moment, we can only connect to cloud sources for writing out data. We really have the data, the remote data gateway is really optimized for that query workload and not any writing. So right now, you have to have something like an ADW or a cloud-based relational target that you can target. A lot of our customers are starting to use an ADW for that scenario, and they're pretty happy with that experience.
Great. So there's another question here. Can we use these data preparation tools, the data flow tool that you showed, to connect to data from other Oracle applications like Fusion?
Yeah, we actually have great connectors for Oracle applications, EPM. Basically, any of the connectors that we have available in Oracle Analytics, you can use either with the data set preparation or with the data flows. And that's definitely one of the strengths of the platform.
Can we use data flows in place or Oracle data integration? In place of Oracle data integration, I think, instead of or.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. Customers sometimes will ask us that scenario. You know, what we really do is we encourage, we target self-service tools for the business analyst and, you know, helping people get enrichments from the data they already have. If you have a more complex ETL system that's really managed by IT and you have, you know, you're doing something like slowly changing dimensions, more complicated workflows, you really want to use a tool like ODI or the new Oracle Data Integration Cloud or other tools. You know, there's obviously other great tools that do this kind of work. So it's really a complement to those existing kind of data warehousing tools.
Yeah, and that's I'm going to use this as a plug. We are going to have on the 22nd at 8 a.m. Pacific time, we're going to have a partner tech talk. So on that with Julian Tassout. So if you're interested in learning more about the OCI data integration tool, that'd be a great case, and you can find that. You should be able to find a link to that out in Oracle events. So next question, is Essbase Cloud a target?
Essbase is not a target, but it's definitely a source of the data. We had some preliminary things that we're working with Essbase, but it's a little more complicated to build out with the data flow. So what we suggest now is to connect to your Essbase and pull that data over into a data set when you want to use it. And we have a really rich Essbase and EPM connectivity.
Okay, another one. I think we're almost wrapping up here, but let's try to get one or two more in. Can we combine structured and unstructured data in OAC?
There are some ways to do that. Primarily, these data flows are acting on kind of a row basis, and they're kind of parsing things. We have on a roadmap. We're looking at other types of unstructured data that we want to support. So that would be a great thing to put onto the idea lab for us to discuss kind of what sources people are looking at related to the kind of the PNG example or the JPEG example as well. Those would be great topics to interact with the product management team out in the idea lab.
Right, and if you go to the hub here on 24 for the OA Summit in early June, Marty Goober with Oracle's database team had a great session on how to use Cloud SQL to pull together unstructured data and present it in a structured way in OAC, which you could then pull together. So that's another resource for people as well.
Yeah, great.
Okay,
great
so
example.
one last question, and then we'll get done. We'll wrap it up. Someone asked how this compares with Trifecta or Paxata.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of different tools that do similar things. I think the main focus we have is making this experience really easy to use for customers in that OAC experience. So you have all of your access controls, you have all of your subject areas exposed in there. And so really the focus we have on this part of the tool set, there's a lot of things in OCI and Oracle Cloud that you can use, and then third-party tools as well. We're really focused on that ease of use and making things really simple for the business analyst and the user that's trying to extract data from the bigger systems that they have. So.
Right, and it's all provisioned together, so your IT or your procurement team doesn't have to go find 4 different tool sets, even Oracle tool sets for you. It's all
exactly.
one bundle. You bet.
And then you can share your work and share your data sets and all that. Yeah.
Exactly, all within the same experience. Well, this was a great, at least for me, this was a great session. I hope everyone else enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you, and I think we're going to wrap it up.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.